All right, I got a listener question today. When you go to the range for a practice session, do you take a notebook or binder to record your results for time and accuracy? How and what are you tracking? This is a good question. Anymore, if it's training frequently and drills I'm familiar with, I'll know roughly what time it should be. So I could just look at the drill and say, oh, it's L pres, sub 4 would be good, low 4s would be good. I've done 4-3 in a match before. I could kind of just like cite these numbers off my head just because it's a drill I've known, I've done before, it's familiar. However, especially when Ben and I started carbine training, this has been several years ago, before we'd ever did a book or anything. We had drills that we were doing or we got from somebody else, we were making up. I really like using Apple Notes. It's super handy. So I would just keep a note for a variety of stuff, whether it's reminders for YouTube content, podcast topics, a to-do list, whatever. But I would have one for carbine drills. And I would just it would have the drill name and then kind of a time or a sense of what's going on. I'll give you some examples. So for example, it'd be sub 3 seconds is good, or it'd be 6.5 few C's, something like that. Or Matt Pranka's CQB warm-up drill, training on that for quite a while. And I would just put down reminders next to each of the part-time stuff for me. So for example, first strings, some 40 meter shooting. I didn't have in my brain, or I'd have in my notes, just like, you have enough time, just be accountable. Everything kind of has to be on point. Maybe towards the end where I'm doing from like the bolt lock, and I have to do a bolt lock reload. Think like, hey, you got plenty of time, just do it right. Maybe in the middle, this is going to be really, really tight, where you're shooting at 40, running up to 20. The time's going to be really, really tight. You have to be on it. So anyway, for journals, for me, it's just more of a sense of how it's going to go, maybe a reminder for something I need to work on, or I've got plenty of time on this, just be accountable, or time should run in this distance, something like that. I know some people that like keeping, not maybe Excel sheets excessive, but kind of an excessive amount of data, historical, as far as how many reps. When they went to the range, they did this many rounds, they did this many repetitions, and they recorded this many hits. If your brain works that well, I could see where it would be helpful, but I think it just takes too much time. For me anyway, the way my brain works, I'd rather just be in the moment, paying attention to what's going on, and not needing to divert my attention or write something down to kind of slow what's going on because I'm recording the data. So for me, it's just kind of a reminder for how it went, what the time should be, or I could just look and say, oh, track the A zone, this should be low 3, something like that with a traditional setup. And then, oh, okay, cool. That just kind of sets the expectation for where it should be, compared to then it puts you in a spot where you shoot the drill and you're not really sure, like, is that good or not? Where was I at last time? So I wouldn't necessarily record personal best, but for me, it was just helpful to know what's kind of acceptable where I've been. But with that said, I've always been a frequent trainer, but if you're not as frequent of a trainer, I could see what would help you remember. A fun example, I can remember, it's got to be 5, 6, 7, maybe 8 years ago. I'm terrible with this stuff, but I remember working on the 4 aces drill really, really hard with a pistol. So for people not familiar, in dry fire or live fire, draw the gun, fire 2 shots, do a mag change, and fire 2 more shots. 4 aces for 4 alphas. And I remember even in dry fire, if I got down to 2.2, 2.4 seconds, I felt like I was getting pretty sporty. I felt like that was kind of my limit. If I could get to 2.2, I was really, really happy with that. Then with some training, and I fast forward probably 6 months later, in dry fire, I could get to the 1.8s, 1.9s. And then when I started looking at those times, I kind of went back and thought about it. And I remembered, hey, I was struggling. 2.2 I used to think was really, really fast. Now my really, really fast is 0.4 of a second faster. So in that sense, it was good for me just to kind of, people kind of underestimate how much you can accomplish over a large amount of time. So, but they overestimate what they can do just in one day when they're there. For example, you go to the range with 500 rounds or even 1,000 rounds. You expect magic 'cause you got 1,000 rounds of ammo or 500 rounds of ammo all day to train, and you really expect a lot. Maybe that day happens, maybe maybe that day it doesn't, but you just kind of like whatever, that's your expectations for the day. But if you went out every weekend and at least fired a couple hundred rounds for months and months, the next thing you know, whatever your high score was is blown out of the water with something you're way better capable of now, way more consistent, way faster, way everything, fill in the blank. So anyway, to answer the question directly, if I'm doing a practice session, I don't do a notebook or binder. I like notes. And for me, if I'm keeping track of something, it would just be a loose sense of what an acceptable time is, or how things go, or a sporty time, sub this time or around this time with a few C's acceptable, no deltas, should be all A's this time, maybe historic best, something like that. But it's not something I would update a ton throughout the practice session. Maybe it's something I update once in a while, or when I'm done training on the drill for that day, just so I have a sense. If I don't get back to that drill until next month, I can kind of remember what my previous best or where I think things should be, as a good way to gauge if I'm starting off in the right place, or if I'm starting my training aggressively enough, or if I'm leaning back too much and relaxing when it's like, no, that's way off the pace. This has got to be faster. So it's a good way to set expectations, maybe is a better word. So anyway, hopefully that's helpful explaining what I record in a practice session. If you want, you can like, share, subscribe. If you don't, I don't care. But hopefully that answers your question. If you have any other questions or things you want me to answer, drop them below in the comments.